Good morning. Would you please rise up in body and spirit as you are willing and able, and join us and come sing a song with me. Number 346 sounds like this.
Just the slides, that was hard to do, so with everything that Justin and Brandon are doing back there, it's much more complicated. Welcome to the worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lakeland. My name is Helen Dingus, and I use the pronouns she and her. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful September morning. To those of you here in person and to those of you on Zoom or social media, we are glad to have you, however you have arrived. Please know that you belong here, whatever your gender identity, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, abilities, or theological beliefs. Unitarian Universalism is a loving and affirming faith in which we learn, grow, and co-create the sacred as a community. If you are new here, please know that we would love to get to know you better. So please join us after the service in the social hall or say hello in an online chat feature. Our e-newsletter is published every Wednesday, and it is the main source of information for UUCL. Please be sure to sign up and read all about this happening community. Printed copies are available, and there's one posted on our hallway bulletin board.
Good morning. I'm Heather Norby. I use the pronouns she and hers. I'm also a seminary student at Meadville Lombard Theological School, which means I am your spiritual life director, something like that. That's kind of how I got here to this place. I'm the spiritual life director, and they send me to seminary. Okay. Sorry, my script just went away. All right. I would like to lift up a few items from the newsletter that serve our mission statement of love plus connection equals transformation. This afternoon at 2 p.m., the Broadway Chorus has a concert right here in the sanctuary. This Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., well, there might be a hurricane. Or, if not, perhaps we will start something new with a game and music night. We'll have to see what this week brings. Game night as in bring a game to play, and music as in give me a song about belonging that really calls to you, and I'll put it on a playlist, and we'll come together and have some fun. October 8th, that's a Saturday, is a fundraiser for the church, and we'll be making chimes out of pots, clay pots? Terracotta pots. So Gal is leading that activity. Please see her if you would like to participate and for more information. Small groups, I'm going to have sign-up sheets after the service, and we'll be asking you all who would like to sign up and make it official so we can get started. We will start new membership classes in November, so if you are new here and want to know more about us, let me know, and I'll give you information. Our leadership training is coming up. Please register with the Board of Trustees at board@uuclakeland.org. If you would like to get involved with this training, it won't take up too much of your time, but we would like to be a leader-full congregation, so please sign up for that. And next week is a blessing of the animals. It will be led by Jenny Warren, and she is asking for folks to, well, of course, you can bring your animals, and also, because they'll be blessed, also to email your stories about how your animals have saved your lives or helped you through hard times. Email them to uuclproductions@uuclakeland.org. And you can also ask questions about, like, what are you looking for? And Jenny will let you know how she's going to present these stories to the congregation, how your animals have helped you or even saved your life. Okay. Oh, and also we're looking for coming out stories. We'll be celebrating LGBTQ Community's Coming Out Day on October 9th, and you can email them to Brandon Knuckles. Okay, I think I got it. For this month of September, during which we have approached the autumn equinox, a time during which day and night find balance, a time which dawns the hint of harvest here in Florida, maybe some cooler weather and a hurricane, we are taking a spiritual journey together. Like the balance of day and night during the equinox, we are finding ways to balance belonging to ourselves and to each other. We are discovering the ways in which we can harvest our spiritual gifts and share them so that we can continue to grow love and connection in a world in which everyone can belong. So let us center ourselves in belonging. Get comfortable in your seat. Close your eyes if you'd like. Breathe in. Breathe out. Feel yourself in this room right now. Feel yourself in the seat in which you sit and know that you belong. Picture yourselves each as a drop. You've come together to make a whole. Each of us is human and unique in our own way, yet we belong. Because each of us has come from this sacred Mother Earth, and to the earth we will return. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop, says Rumi.
Chalice Lighting on Belonging by Reverend Karen LeBlanc. This isn't just a place of worship. This isn't just a fellowship of like minds. This isn't just a Sunday morning filled with spirit and topped off with coffee and cookies. This is our church, our congregation, where we are building beloved community, where we are opening ourselves to each other, where we trust and love, rise and fall together. This is where we feel safe. This is where we know we are welcomed. This is where we belong. For this gift and so many others, we light our chalice. Today, our chalice lighter is Petra Sussman. Please, oh, that's later. Were we supposed to read that with the chalice lighting, or are we singing with the chalice lighting?
Now we're going to sing.
Okay.
I have a story for all ages today, and I hear that there are children on Zoom, possibly. They weren't feeling well today, so they stayed home. This is a story of belonging, and it's a story about an early American Universalist whose name was John Murray. This was written for our Tapestry of Faith curriculum on the UUA website by Kelly Weissman Aspruth Jackson. There once was a person named John Murray. He lived in England and worked as a minister there. The congregation to which he belonged took religion very seriously. They believed in life after death, but they thought that almost everyone was going to have a terrible, horrible time after they died. Just a very few people would get to live on comfortably forever. This belief was very important to John's congregation. They didn't like anyone challenging it. Now, it happened that John Murray met first one person and then a whole bunch of people who disagreed with the idea so precious to his congregation. These new friends of John also believed in a life after death, but they thought that everyone would get to live together, happily, instead of a few people having fun and everyone else being miserable. After a while, John decided that this idea made more sense to him and seemed like the kinder and better way for the world to be. So he became a Universalist. But John's old congregation didn't like his ideas at all. Not only did they not want to hear about them, but they told him that if he was going to have such ideas about everyone getting to be happy after they died, he would have to leave their church. A lot of other bad things happened in John's life after he was forced to leave his community. He lost his family, and he ended up in prison for not being able to pay money that he owed. When he left England for the British colonies in North America, this was before there was a country called the United States of America, he swore he would never preach or work as a minister ever again. At this time, all the ships that people used to travel were blown from place to place by the wind. As John's ship was getting near his destination in New York, it was blown away to New Jersey and had to stay there until the winds changed direction. John went ashore to find something to eat while his ship was stuck, and he met a man named Thomas Potter. Tom had been hoping for years to find someone who would preach in the little lonely church that he had built himself. Tom held the same unpopular idea about life after death that John did. He was also a Universalist. Tom asked John over and over again to preach in his little empty church, but John had sworn never to preach again. Finally, however, Tom got John to promise that he would preach if the winds did not change in time for his ship to leave by Sunday. John hoped that he would be gone by then and wouldn't have to make good on his promise. But the winds did not change, and that Sunday, John Murray preached his first sermon in North America. Instead of abandoning his previous life as a minister, John went on from New Jersey to spread the idea of universalism all over the American Northeast. For that, we have not only John Murray to thank, we also owe our gratitude to Thomas Potter, who knew that there were people who needed John's message, a message of belonging, and worked so hard to convince him to share it with the world. The end. If the children were here, they would be allowed to leave, but they're not, and so now Melissa and Jerry get to sit through my service too. So now we're going to engage in our weekly ritual of joys and sorrows. I'd like to recognize that Rosh Hashanah begins at sunset tonight, and that begins the Jewish New Year. So Happy New Year to all of our Jewish friends. Lift up Joshua, whose ankle's recovering nicely, although he's not feeling well today and is at home. Also would like to remind you that Carl Jesse Crossan's service, Celebration of Life service, is at 3 p.m. on October 9th, and Marilyn invites all of her church family to attend. And Presley Steele and Calliope Steele aren't feeling well. They're our little ones, and so they're at home. And we hope that they feel better as we miss them. And of course, their siblings, Isabella and Dakota, and their parents, Kat and Nick. Of course, this week, we don't know where this hurricane is going to go, so I would just like to say, we're all here to support one another, so let's make sure that if it does happen to come this way, that we keep in touch and make sure that everyone has everything that they need. So we'll invite you up to the chalice table to drop a pebble in the bowl of water. We do have new instructions for you today, because it seems that often our backsides are facing the camera, and we would like for our front sides to be facing the camera and to be on social media. So Petra will show you where we're going to make the line. And Adam too, apparently. So we're going to ask you for joys and sorrows to go around this way and line up over here drop a pebble. We have some autumn joys and sorrow stones and bowls up here. Drop a pebble into the water and then go back that way. Okay? All right. So, if you're on Zoom, also we will say your name and drop a pebble in for you. All right, musicians, please lead us in joys and sorrows. Here we are, together on Sunday. My hopes are that Sundays are a day that you look forward to all week, knowing that is a time of peace and restfulness in a community that embraces you. My hopes are that this time that you set aside for Sundays is a time that you look forward to because you can breathe, recenter your spirit, and find inspiration to face the week ahead. I hope it is a time of soul nourishment and a time to challenge your mind with learning opportunities. I hope this time is a window to personal growth. I hope that you look forward to this Sunday time and this Unitarian Universalist space because you feel deep in your heart the potential for this community to make change in the world. I hope that you come with love, to be loved, to connect, and to transform yourself and the world around you. The song that Justin just so beautifully sang, Come Sunday, was written by jazz composer Duke Ellington in 1942. A New York Times article tells us that this song is an ode to the singular day that Black workers historically, clad in Sunday best, could shed the sweat and grit of labor, emerging as glistening butterflies gathered to praise the Lord. The lyrics communicate with crystal clarity Ellington's admiration for laborers and his elegant insistence on unconditional respect. Ellington had testified to the power of love in so many of his popular songs over the decades. His signature phrase to his fans was, "Love you madly." It is said that the love in the air at his sacred concerts was something imbued with the spirit of prayer. I think we all got a sense of that just now. Love and the spirit of prayer filling the air around us. Ellington grew up in the Baptist and African Methodist Episcopal, or AME, churches of his parents. As I dive into some of our Universalist history, I found that there are quite a few connections to these denominations. So, as I've discovered, September 30th has been designated as Universalist Day. Who knew? Anybody heard of that? This is to be a day that celebrates an all-embracing love, a love from God, from one another, the spirit of life, however you interpret it from your own personal theological stance. Universalist Day celebrates the loving idea that we are all born whole and holy rather than sinful. It's a day that lifts up the universalist theology that we are all indeed worthy of love, equity, justice, and joy in the here and now. We are all good, and we can all do good. September 30th was chosen as this day because it is the day that John Murray, whose story I read earlier, landed on the New Jersey shore and helped to spread Universalism. The history of how Universalism spread and came to be a denomination in this country is, as history always tends to be, complex. It includes many stories, not just that of the Englishman who came to America spreading some good news theology. So today, I offer you pieces, slender bits of insights into a very complicated history of your faith, of the Universalist stream of it anyway. These insights come from my learning so far in my UU History and Polity class this semester, which Helen is in with me, by the way. As one might imagine, the required material that we have to read or listen to is extensive. This is a small selection right here. And yet, all of it is still only pieces of our history. There are many stories of Unitarianism and Universalism. It is all the stories together that make the whole of our faith. But even if we don't have time to get to know all the stories, we can still learn by listening to some of the stories. We can learn about the theology of this faith and how it shaped the actions of those that came before us. Those actions, like ever-expanding rings in the water after a drop falls into it, those actions still being felt today. We can learn from some of the stories, at least, of the hopes and aspirations of people and how they led this faith into the future. And we can learn also of the missed opportunities and where potentially great world-changing dreamers and their communities met a dead end. So today I offer you a few pieces in honor of Universalist Day, of course, that will hopefully enlighten you in the ways that you belong to this faith and to which the responsibilities of this faith belong to you. Today won't be the only day I offer you pieces of our history, to be sure. It's also not the first time by any means that I've lifted up our history in a worship service. But what I endeavor to achieve is a more nuanced approach to the complex histories that have formed us as a denomination. I hope to break through our mythologized, exceptionalist history and to uncover some truth. Truth that we can be proud of and the truths that are painful, but so very necessary to look at so that we don't continue into a future that makes the same mistakes. We'll make mistakes, to be sure, there's no escaping it, but we can live into a more informed, more mature, and fully developed future if we study our past with a critical lens. So we begin with John Murray, sort of. The thing is, when John Murray arrived here in 1770, one of the reasons he was able to preach a theology of universal salvation was because small congregations in which that sort of theology was accepted, they already existed. Many of these congregations were Baptist. They existed in the hill country towns of New England. Not having the financial resources, they were not able to pay for ministers, and so they were left to wrestle with biblical scriptures on their own. And what they found and how they interpret it was a far cry from the Calvinist doctrines of predestination and a miserable afterlife. They found in the scriptures a loving God and universal salvation. They began to teach it and preach it, and John Murray found people to which he could belong. He even found his wife, Judith Sargent Stevens, the first female playwright in America, by the way, and a women's rights activist. They were married in the late 1780s. What developed during this early period of American Universalist history were two kinds of Universalist theology, that of the ultra-Universalists and that of the Universalist Restorationists. So I'm going to read from my book. This is a way of inviting you into my studies. This is Universalists and Unitarians in America, written by John Boerens. While the Unitarians in this era began to preach salvation by character rather than by faith or works, Universalists eventually formulated their position as salvation for all irrespective of character. The phrase comes from Hosea Ballou, who held to ultra-universalism. Sin is punished in this life only, he said. There is no punishment after death, only death and glory. But other Universalist ministers disagreed with Ballou. Like John Murray and a man named Elihanan Winchester, they believed in the eventual restoration of all souls to God, but only after a period of just retribution and spiritual penance, like purgatory. These Universalist restorationists were horrified by Ballou's ultra-universalism, and the ensuing conflict became bitter almost as soon as Ballou came to Boston, which is, of course, where a lot of the Unitarians were. There are lots of juicy and interesting details about how all of this played out, but what I find really interesting is that for a while, and because of the influence of spiritualism, which, yes, was and still is a part of Universalist theology, Universalist restorationism won the debate. As John Bwarens explains, the assertion, this is from spiritualism, of messages from restless spirits suggested that perhaps the restorationists had been right. After death, perhaps still more spiritual work goes on, beyond just death and glory. And so Universalists backed away from Hosea Ballou, including his own nephew, Hosea Ballou II. Hosea Ballou II also advocated for two more issues which Father Ballou opposed: a seminary education and direct church involvement in social issues. This man supported the Universalist General Reform Association, which set 40 lofty goals. They sought to address, first and foremost, slavery and women's rights. Next were anti-war, non-resistance, and American Indian affairs, and social institutions and habits such as temperance and education. Additionally, these Universalists opposed the death penalty and advocated prison reform and rehabilitation. Perhaps it is in our hymn number 132 that the choir will sing for you, "Bright Those Jewels," that we can hear the echoes of these early Universalist social reform movements. The words were written by Hosea Ballou II. Thank you, choir. The history of Universalist theology in America is not just a history of white people. Indeed, there were African Americans, whether born free or into slavery, that were drawn to Universalism. But here's the thing. It was also a hard sell. Imagine that you believe in an afterlife. Imagine that you or your family had been enslaved. Imagine a theology that says, all go to heaven, even the white slaveholders. You see, Universalism did not account for the suffering that Black people had to endure. Theology in Black churches said that surely white slaveholders would suffer in hell for eternity, while Black folks who suffered here on earth would enjoy an eternity in heaven. Certainly that gives meaning to the line in Come Sunday that says, heaven is a goodness time, a brighter light on high. And so for a Black person to preach a Universalist theology was perceived as some sort of heretical theology in the Black church. It made no sense. It was no reassuring and comforting theology to those suffering such racist atrocities. Indeed, as Mark Morrison Reed informs us, the Bishop Carlton Pearson, a Pentecostal African American, found this was still true in the 1990s, after preaching a gospel of inclusion to his once 6,000-member congregation. It dwindled to a few hundred and then closed. Bishop Pearson now preaches at the Tulsa, Oklahoma UU Church, the biggest UU church in the country, along with many other ministers. It's a big church. But you can find out more about this story in the film entitled Come Sunday, which I think is on Netflix. But yet, returning to earlier history, there were early Black American preachers and teachers of Universalist theology. Mark Morrison Reed names them and tells their stories in his book, Darkening the Doorways. Early Black Universalists, those whose histories have been uncovered anyway, include Joseph Jordan, Thomas E. Wise, Mary J. Jordan, Joseph Fletcher Jordan, and Annie B. Willis. Their stories tell of a century of inspired work done in the coastal area of Virginia. It tells us that it's not just theology that kept us from beloved community, but also overt and systemic racism. I hope to do this story the justice in the short time we have together today. In 1887, this man, Joseph Jordan, or possibly pronounced Joseph Jordan, was the first ordained African-American Universalist minister. And he started the Universalist Church in Norfolk, Virginia. Not only that, but he started a day school there for the children in the Black community who otherwise didn't have access to education. And despite the trouble that he had in preaching his theology and having his theology accepted by the Black community, his church did grow. And it grew so much that he went to the larger Universalist organization and said, hey, I need some money for a building. And they helped him raise some $28,000 to build a church and the day school. It was so successful that then in Suffolk, Virginia in 1897, they opened another church and day school. And one also in Ocean View, which is in that coastal area of Virginia. They were run successfully until Joseph Jordan passed away in 1901. Then Thomas Wise, who worked with Jordan, was left to run the schools by himself, the schools and the congregation, and was trying to balance 3 congregations and day schools in 3 areas, and was very, very hopeful that they would thrive and be sustained into the future. But he was trying to get some help, because imagine, that's a big job. And so he turned again to the larger Universalist organization, and they said, you know what? Nah, that's too much. We're going to just close down 2 of those. We'll close down the Norfolk one and the Ocean View one and just focus on the Suffolk one. He wasn't happy with that, and so he left. He left Universalism, and he went back to the AME Church, not as a minister or a teacher, just as a congregant. And even though he lived to 1930, we don't know a whole lot about his life, except for he had a lot of personal not so great personal issues happen in his life after that, like divorce, having a hard time finding a job and supporting himself. After he left in 1902, Mary and Joseph Jordan, not related to the first Joseph Jordan, came to the school and helped to preach and to teach. Now, as it turns out, the church wasn't so successful, but the day school was. Because this was a place where the kids could come and feel loved. I mean, this is the Universalist theology in action, right? The Jordans, and they had 3 daughters that taught there as well, were putting their Universalist theology into action. The children came, they learned, They were being educated, feeling empowered, and it was successful for several years, actually. And the denomination, the Universalist denomination, was supporting them for a while until 1922, when a white Universalist minister who became, his name was John Van Schaik, and he became editor of the Universalist publication called The Leader, started to take the news about the Suffolk School, which was usually on the front page and well supported, and move it to the back in just a little column. So people weren't learning about this place, about how successful it was, and about how this community was being empowered through universalism, through education. And then came the Depression. Again, history's complicated, right? The Depression, funding is decreasing, the parents can't afford to even pay a small amount of tuition. Annie Willis, who was Mary and Joseph Jordan's daughter, sacrificed her salary to keep things running, to make sure that the kids had at least bread and soup, to make sure that the teachers had a salary. It was a lot of work for her, and she also then turned to the larger Universalist denomination and said, I need some help. And they said, you know, we're going to turn this school. You don't need the school. You need social services instead. There's other schools. It's not what they needed. But it's a white male-run denomination thinking that they know best. And really, they're just reinforcing Black disempowerment. So Annie stayed, and she went with the social services job, and she did the best that she could. They did eventually were able to bring a kindergarten, at least, back into that community. But, again, in 1969, the UUSC, there was a merger. The Unitarians, the Universalists merged in 1961. So in 1969, we have the UUSC, who had just promised to help the African American community, the Black people in the denomination, but yet cut funding, completely cut off that school. It still managed to go on with some help from the local community, but in 1984, the school closed. This is an example of a white denomination, run mostly by men at the time, who think they are helping those who are lesser than them, less fortunate, less educated, etc. But the point is not to help in a Band-Aid sort of way. The point is to empower. To empower by listening to what the leaders in the Black community say they need, and by sharing their white power and wealth to make that happen. Universalism isn't just about saying that all are loved and worthy and welcome. It's about empowering all people so that they find a place of belonging at the table of redemption and salvation, of equity and justice. A lot has happened since then, and obviously we have a short time together today. So what I'm asking of you now is to take this Universalist theology seriously. Whether you believe in God or not, if you are a Unitarian Universalist, you embrace the theological disposition that every human is worthy of love and salvation. That is a theology that must be examined deeply. What exactly does that mean? What exactly does that look like in the world? How do you embody and enact that theology? This was written, this is the Darkening the Doorways by Mark Morrison Reed, and he included in here an affirmation of social principles written in 1943 by the General Assembly of the Universalist Church of America. I'll just read you part of it. We Universalists avow our faith in the supreme worth of every human personality and in the power of men of goodwill and sacrificial spirit to overcome all evil and progressively establish the kingdom of God. This faith is being challenged on every side. We therefore reaffirm our historic stand and call upon our people to think through and act upon faith. In the field of social welfare, we must acquaint ourselves with the faith and practice of other religionists that we may help to overcome the destructive force of religious prejudice. Remember, this is in 1943, so I'm reading those words. We must recognize that today Americans of Negro, Indian, and Oriental descent, and many not yet citizens, are suffering from unjust forms of discrimination. We must combat every such form of race prejudice by practical steps, which shall achieve a just status for these, our brethren. So take a look around the room right now. See who is here and who is not. It's very white in here. Just saying. It's not to say that being white is bad. Throw that thought away. That's a lie that the right wing is trying to get you to believe about what woke progressive people are trying to tell you, right? Does that make sense? We can talk about it after the service. But when conservatives say that woke progressives are trying to make you feel bad by examining history and racism with a critical eye, it's because those not woke white people are afraid they're going to lose their power and wealth. But I've got some good news for y'all. News from a Universalist theology, which says, you are all worthy and you are all saved. Lifting up BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous people of color, and centering their stories and sharing power does not lessen the inherent worth and dignity of white people. Rather, it enriches all of us, and it helps people on the margins. But it is a call to action for white people specifically to start undoing the harm that our ancestors created. In the spirit of universalism, our eighth principle calls us to build a diverse and multicultural beloved community because it is the only way to spiritual wholeness. Mark Morrison Reed wrote in his book that if Joseph F. Jordan had a universalist answer to the question of Black suffering, we don't know what it was. Imagine if the Black Universalist endeavor in Virginia had been successful until this day. We might know what that answer was. We might have a universalist theology deepened by the sharing across culture, race, and experience. How rich that would be. To build a universalist faith into the future is going to require hard work. Universalism goes beyond naively saying that all are loved and all are saved. It goes beyond putting up signs that say all are welcome, that Black lives matter. It means doing the work of dismantling white supremacy culture as it exists in ourselves and this community. It means taking a good look in the mirror and seeing all the ways in which internalized racism supports a larger systemic kind of racism. There are books to read. There are resources on the UUA website to help out. There are no doubt books that Gail has put up on our bookshop.org, and there are ways to engage with one another here. Our book group has done a good job in the past at digging into the material together. White people, it's not about feeling bad about yourself or feeling guilty. That's not helpful at all. Indeed, keep your universalist theology close to you as you do this work. The work that our 8th UU principle calls us to, dismantling systems of oppression within ourselves and our institutions, is about challenging your deeply held perceptions that most of us don't even realize are harmful because they're so normalized in our culture. and then changing your behavior in the ways you engage with those who are different from you. It's about discovering the ways in which white supremacy culture marginalizes certain people and hurts all of us by keeping us divided, stripped of a deeper kind of learning, and even of a deeper kind of universalist theology that really can save us all. I want to read for you a poem by Amanda Gorman. She just recited it to the UN General Assembly the other day. It's called An Ode We Owe. How can I ask you to do good when we've barely withstood our greatest threats yet? The depths of death, despair, and disparity, atrocities across cities, towns, and countries, lives lost, climatic costs, exhausted, angered, we are endangered, not because of our numbers, but because of our numbness. We're strangers to one another's perils and pain, unaware that the welfare of the public and the planet share a name. Equality doesn't mean being the exact same, but enacting a vast aim, the good of the world to its highest capability. The wise believe that our people without power leaves our planet without possibility. Therefore, though poverty is a poor existence, complicity is a poorer excuse. We must go the distance. Though this battle is hard and huge, though this fight we did not choose, for preserving the earth isn't a battle too large to win, but a blessing too large to lose. This is the most pressing truth, that our people have only one planet to call home, and our planet has only one people to call its own. We can either divide and be conquered by the few, or we can decide to conquer the future and say that today a new dawn we wrote. Say that as long as we have humanity, we will forever have hope. Together, we won't just be the generation that tries, but the generation that triumphs. Let us see a legacy where tomorrow is not driven by the human condition, but by our human conviction. And while hope alone can't save us now, with it we can brave the now, because our hardest change hinges on our darkest challenges. Thus may our crisis be our cry, our crossroad, the oldest ode we owe each other. We chime it for the climate, for our communities. We shall respect and protect every part of this planet, hand it to every heart on this earth, until no one's worth is rendered by the race, gender, class, or identity they were born. This morn, let it be sworn that we are one human kin, grounded not just by the griefs we bear, but by the good we begin. To anyone out there, I only ask that you care before it's too late, that you live aware and awake, that you lead with love in hours of hate. I challenge you to heed this call. I dare you to shape our fate. Above all, I dare you to do good so that the world might be great. Such wise words from such a young woman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
We have now come upon the moment when we can share our treasures with this community as an act of faith. When we each give what we can back to life, we serve a greater good, helping to create a world in which everyone knows they belong. Adam and Jason will serenade us while the ushers pass the plates. Or just Jason? Okay.
Thank you for the sacred noodling today, Jason. That's what we call it. That's ritual artists speak, sacred noodling. Helen, would you please read our closing words?
In our hymnal, you will see that these words are attributed to John Murray. That's inaccurate. John Burns tells us that these words were what Universalist professor of preaching Alfred Storer Cole in 1950 depicted the zeitgeist of the Revolutionary era as telling Murray, "Go out into the highways and byways, give the people something of your new vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it, let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of, we'll say, people. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the goodness and everlasting love of God." Please join me in the chalice extinguishing words as Petra comes forward to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world.
Now, if you would, please rise up in body and spirit. We're going to have a hymn. This is number 299 in the gray hymnal. It goes like this.
into the world, share the gifts of universalism, share the gifts of you, because you are loved, you are worthy, and you are a blessing. Thank you. Be well this week. Let's keep in touch just in case that hurricane does hit us.